welcome to today's episode of FMD TV. My name's Lee Watling, and today we're tackling a really important topic around aged care. Joining me today are my two special guests, Rebecca Boynton, Senior Financial Advisor at FMD, who is an aged care specialist and has been advising in this space for over 5 years now. We also have Carl Hunting. Carl's Senior Financial Advisor at FMD and has been since 2020. Prior to that, really relevant to today's conversation, Carl was a part owner of a specialist aged care financial advice practice. Thank you both very much for joining me.
Thinking that you're not ready for aged care and that you'll be able to continue to live independently in a retirement village. A lot of people don't understand that a retirement village is very similar to continuing to live at home in that there isn't additional healthcare or support provided. So to me, I think it's probably better to skip that and either continue to stay at home with support or go into aged care where you have everything there that you could possibly need.
I see obviously the financial impact pretty strong as well, where if you get into a retirement village, you have to expect that you're going to lose something in the order of 40% of your capital when you leave again. There's the refurbishment costs and you really don't get to participate in capital growth. But the main aspect is it's a bad financial investment. But sometimes, the investment decisions aren't, everything we decide to do is not necessarily geared around the money. And there could be a few friends you will make. It could be the mental health benefits of being surrounded by people of your own age or your neighbour. So that shouldn't be forgotten in the whole decision around retirement villages or not. But I would agree with Beck in saying it's a bit of a trap to go into a retirement village if you leave it a bit too late. So try and jump over that aspect. And getting your money out of a retirement village is also very hard. It can take up to 2 years to access the capital and they won't return it to you very, very quickly either. And that's this idea of selling the house without actually making the consideration around the benefits of renting and doing those calculations. Aged care is not something that's planned for very easily. It can often happen within a whim. You might fall over in the shower and you've got really 3 or 4 days to make some big decisions around signing the contract. So one of the mistakes we see is this assumption that you need to sell the house immediately to provide the capital to the nursing home, and that can bring about a host of problems. There's penalty interest involved. There's the pushy nature of real estate agents in that process when you're emotionally vulnerable, and it's also not a one-size-fits-all approach to selling versus renting, because depending on the threshold involved with the pension, it can be advantageous to sell the home, pay the RAD, but in other instances it can actually be miles ahead if you rented the home. And some of these question marks around is the house looking to go to a relative in the long term anyways.
When you head to an aged care facility to check it out for your loved one, the salesperson is going to dwell on the fact that $500,000 or $800,000 might be required for a deposit. They may not be so quick to explain that you don't need a lump sum, that there are other ways to pay for it. So, a financial advisor can provide you with a sort of an objective overview and can go through the numbers and provide you with the different scenarios to get the best outcome, to make sure that your aged care fees aren't inflated, to perhaps even get the age pension if you didn't receive it prior, or to, maintain as much of the age pension as possible. So, rushing to sell the home is often, a decision that's made and it can't be undone. Well, Carl likes to describe this as the hospital conversation, the hospital car park conversation, which unfortunately we see a lot, and that is perhaps mum or dad's had a fall and they're in hospital and the hospital won't release them to go home. They insist that your loved one has to go into aged care. And that's when decisions need to be made very, very quickly. So we would always say, if you get to the point where you start to think about perhaps mum or dad needs some care, be proactive, start to do some research, and there are ways that an advisor can help to avoid that critical decision making that might be required with a hospital car park conversation.
There's a number of reasons why picking moments of the year around March, April versus July, August is going to set you up for a better entry into care. I can name so many examples of my clients where there's only one vacancy available in that whole sort of 4-month window, and waiting too long means that the paperwork is often not in order and not returned back from the government, which means that when there's 10 people vying for that one bed at a particular desired nursing home, guess what? You miss out. And missing out is quite bad when you've got 2 or 3 kids that are driving 25 kilometres now every day back and forth, when it could have only been 2 kilometres up the road, and that really hurts for the last 2 years of life.
The Centrelink paperwork, the aged care paperwork, often takes quite some time to complete and then to be processed by the relevant agencies. And in fact, if I take a step back and look at an aged care assessment, which is, the social worker coming to assess your loved one to see whether they are the right candidate for aged care, it can take 6 weeks just to get an appointment with a person like that. So the quicker you can get onto it, the smoother it's going to go, and the more dignified, I guess, a process it will be. And it just allows everyone to step back, take the time, and to make really good decisions rather than, really fast decisions under immense pressure.
Everyone's sitting around the table or after Christmas lunch, and we're noticing that mum or dad have declined a bit more recently. Let's not leave that until things really take a turn for the worse. Let's start the process early, engage everyone, because often it's a family decision too, and make sure that the planning starts early, because the earlier it starts, the easier it is to get, and particularly, Carl, your point is to get the location you want.
Well, that's right. And it's quite common that, if you haven't done your homework and you haven't actually visited 5 or 6 of these, and I recommend to my clients that they make a short list with their top 3, because when push comes to shove, you're not going to be thinking clearly, and you're often rushing from a work meeting at the city or something. So getting that homework done early is really important.
Yeah, it's a stressful process. So the earlier you start, and also the earlier that you get a financial advisor involved, means that you can, or the family can, concentrate on finding the right facility and teeing up the right care for their loved one. It could be specialist dementia care. It could be care for a particular cultural background. An advisor takes over the financial side of things, the paperwork, and leaves the family to, nut out all of the decisions that need to be made for their loved one.
Lee, we see a lot of times where the son or daughter is quite cashed up. They might have a self-managed super fund or access to a lot more cash on the sidelines. And with this 7% interest rate at penalty starting from the get-go, it's quite common for a son or daughter to transfer $500,000 into the nursing home to secure the bed, and then when the home is sold, they invariably take that money back from the son or daughter, and that causes chaos with the means testing system, and they get penalised at Centrelink for the aged care fees as well. So having an understanding through the advice process, we guide our clients with the right contracts to sign and the legal parameters to avoid or sidestep the Centrelink penalties that would apply in that scenario. And there's 2 fundamental things they need to be doing at that point. So transferring monies between kids and the parents has to be done really carefully.
A child often just wants to do what they think is best for the parent, and they jump in and pass a chunk of money over. We can actually help you to assist your mother or father in a different way, which won't have that adverse effect on their age pension or their care fees. We just do it in a different way as opposed to putting a lump sum of money towards the RAD.
A gift or a child paying for their parents' aged care could reduce Centrelink payments, so pension, and increase the cost of aged care. And also, as I understand it, Carl, can have some difficult issues in once the person in care passes away, and if it's not done well, that money could fall to the estate. Is that correct? And not potentially to the person who, if you like, gifted it in the first place.
Correct. There's a definite sequence that often happens, and once it's done, it's done. The other thing we see as well is around this idea of drip feeding the payments versus larger lump sums, and there's a way to do that so again you escape the means testing radar. That's perfectly legal, but it's the way you portray it through the Centrelink paperwork and also transact with your mum and dad. So again, these are the things as part of the advice process that we would discuss with our clients over and above the production of their written report as well.
It's important while mum or dad has their mental capacity to get their will done and get their powers of attorney done. So in most cases, Carl and I wouldn't actually deal with the elderly person. We'd most likely be acting for the children on behalf of the elderly person. So a power of attorney, financial, is what's going to make it a lot easier to make decisions for your mum or dad, sign contracts as required, and deal with a financial advisor. So if you've got any concerns at all about mum or dad and what the future might hold for them, that's a really good place to start. Have that chat with them about whether their will is up to date and whether they've got powers of attorney in place. We have hundreds of clients' experience behind us and personal experience in my case as well, with mum and my mother-in-law having gone into care. So we've done this before and we know what to avoid. What are the decisions? What's the right sequence of events to do things in? The other major thing is that once a contract is signed for aged care, that locks in the financial circumstances in most cases. It almost becomes impossible to undo the mistakes that might have occurred. So get a financial advisor involved early. Rearrange the finances to get the best outcome, and only then, ideally, would a contract be signed for your loved one to go into aged care.
First step is to ascertain what the assets and income is of your mother or father. And the next step generally is the selection of home, or to be starting to shortlist that so you know where the costing is going to be, or rough price of the room. In terms of the process that Beck and I would follow, we then have the first meeting with the client just to effectively pinpoint the best 2 or 3 pathways that would put them in the most advantageous position from a financial standpoint with the government and also their assets and income. We then take that information away, spend 5 or 10 hours with our associates to construct a set of really strong calculations that model that. And then normally in that next 2 weeks, there's been a lot of things that have happened. ACAT assessments and selection of home can generally fall into place. And Beck and I will also sometimes negotiate with the aged care facility or understand what terms they are willing to be flexible on with the way they construct their contract. So that's probably the first part of our advice process we would handle.
These mistakes that can occur with aged care are difficult to undo, and they can be very, very costly long term. So, and just recently I've seen a client who unfortunately didn't come to me early enough in the piece. So it got to the point where I was reviewing his situation and his aged care fees, and I was able to implement a change that is saving him $29,000 a year. So for a fee of about $5,000, unfortunately he has paid additional fees of about $25,000 and would have continued to pay an extra $29,000, but we were able to put a stop to that. So it's an outlay, but for peace of mind and for knowing that you've got the best financial outcome for your loved one.